glasses on, so I can.
If you want to ask questions, please come down to the microphone
Yeah, please come up to
so
the.
everybody can hear you.
I think that is a great idea.
Thanks very much for coming, Cathy.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Have you heard about the incident about 2 years ago at the Ottawa University Hockey Club where two gentlemen were accused of sexual assault?
Yes,
And the whole program is,
and I'm not really sure what happened to that case eventually.
I think there's two men that were tried. Basically, the whole program is
Right.
shut down for about 2 years. I think the hockey program will be reinstated next hockey season. It just seems
Maybe you
like,
can comment on collective punishment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
There's
no,
like sort of
I think
collective
that is,
agreement,
I
the
think
whole
that
team.
is a great point, you know, I think,
I'll let you speak to that issue.
yeah, okay, so, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, whatever the offense is, I mean, collective punishment just seems fundamentally wrong. Now, if you can show that there was some, you know, that there were actions by the hockey team that condone this, you know, then definitely start an investigation, look into this. But yeah, I mean, the fact that and I think the same thing has happened at some schools in the United States where, you know, the entire team sometimes is penalized for the actions of, you know, one or two people. Yeah, no, I think collective punishment, and you know, this happened, by the way, with at the University of Virginia, where all fraternities had their activities suspended due to this accusation that turned out to be false. And you know, and of course, the one fraternity that supposedly was the location of this non-existent crime had their house vandalized. And, you know, no one really ever apologized to them. The fraternity that was accused is suing Rolling Stone magazine, and, you know, good for them. I really think that, you know, more accountability in this area really is essential. But yeah, we really need to start getting away from collective punishment. And, yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, well, my name is Dan from Ottawa, and my question is, like, well, I saw the poster about tonight's event, it said #Gamergate. So what's Gamergate?
Oh,
And also there's, yeah, if you could, well, like, the poster, anyway, there's also this thing, Slut Walk, and I don't know if you've heard of it, there's...
I've heard of Slut Walk.
Yeah, you heard of Slut Walk, and I heard about this
Who
Toronto
hasn't heard of Slut
cop, right, who made a comment.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And yeah, it's just like, you know, kind of a overkill kind of...
Okay, well, we've got
Maybe you
two
can comment on
distinct
Slut Walk and
questions here.
Gamergate.
Yeah, okay, well, I'll comment on Slut Walk. I mean, you know, if you want me to talk about Gamergate, I mean, I could probably spend like, you know,
Oh, or maybe
2
the
hours
gist of
just
it.
explaining what the heck Gamergate is. But, I mean, I will actually comment on it because I think there is an interesting issue there. But, okay, starting with Slut Walk. So yeah, I understand the comment that was made was basically that, you know, women get raped because some women contribute to rape by dressing provocatively. I mean, I actually do kind of think that that wasn't an appropriate comment. I mean, I don't think that, you know, if you're looking at actual rape, I mean, I don't think that, you know, an actual like sexual predator is going to be that influenced by how somebody is dressed. Now, when you get into some of these murky cases, you know, where it's a question of, you know, she didn't say no, she didn't say yes, you know, if you're talking about somebody misreading the signals, can, you know, the way that if a woman is dressed in a very kind of sexualized way, does that contribute to this perception that she is interested in sex? Yes. You know, does that give you the right to, you know, throw her down and physically violate her if she says no? Certainly not. You know, on the other hand, you know, where I think the feminist rhetoric is kind of out of control is that you actually have people saying, you know, I mean, if you're going to say that, you know, being provocatively dressed does not excuse sexual violence, I absolutely agree with you. If you're going to say, you know, being provocatively dressed should not, you know, justify or should not be an excuse for sort of sexual overtures or sexual attention, that's kind of crazy because, you know, it's part of the dynamic. You know, it is very often a sexual signal. And I think, you know, to the extent that...
Like some of the women were bare-breasted in the Slut Walk.
Yeah, okay, I haven't really paid too much attention victim blaming, is that, we're now being told that, it's victim blaming to tell women that it's not a good idea to, get drunk and pass out at a fraternity party. It's victim blaming to encourage women to defend themselves, and, that's just absurd. And of course, we also get these really crazy definitions of rape where, you get these narratives where, he kept coming on to me and I said no a couple of times, but he continued to make sexual advances, and then I finally got tired of saying no and said yes. Well, that's really not rape. I mean, it may be kind of bad behavior, it may not necessarily be bad behavior, it may be part of a mutual dynamic, it's, so I think that is just silly. Gamergate, how many people here know what Gamergate is? Okay, so a lot of you know what Gamergate is.
What made me think?
I'm just going to very quickly try to explain. It's a hashtag that arose kind of over a conflict in the video game community. That has to do basically with a sort of very politicized social justice people who are kind of dragging social justice politics, including feminist politics, into the kind of video gaming world. It's something that I've written about. It's caused a huge conflict. There have been these competing narratives where Gamergate has been described. I mean, it's basically kind of a loose coalition of people involved in video games, many of them majority male, but there are a lot of women involved who don't relate to kind of the extreme cultural politics. They kind of organized with this hashtag on Twitter. They've been accused of being a misogynist harassment mob, which is in my view, extremely unfair. It's this. There's been harassment on both sides of it, and I think it is kind of relevant to my talk in that it's an interesting example of how not only does the harassment of women kind of get taken more seriously, but the harassment of people with the correct politics gets taken more seriously. So that, for instance, and this is really interesting, there have been examples that I could point to of women who are pro-Gamergate being on the receiving end of really horrifically misogynistic comments from supposedly progressive men who think that, if a woman is perceived as anti-feminist, it's okay to tell her that, she's a blow-up doll or something, or a Barbie doll. I mean, Barbie doll is really fairly wild. Lots of things that, I'm not going to repeat. So it's really, it's an interesting example of sort of the politics of victimization. And, there's lots of other aspects to this that I will not go into because otherwise we'll never get out of here.
Just wait. I have first a comment and then a question.
Okay.
Just bringing up the issue of rape stigmatizes men immediately. It's founded on the concept of consent, but men are never asked for consent. And as my students used to say, if the male doesn't stand and deliver to her satisfaction, she'll wreck his reputation. Now, of course, in
without any of the substance. So, the social justice cult, and it really is. I mean, if you look at the mindset, it's very, very cultish. It depends. Everything is determined by a group's position in the oppression sweepstakes, or the oppression Olympics. So that if a group is counted as oppressed or marginalized, it automatically, in social justice discourse, gains in status over, the supposedly more dominant group. Now, Muslims are defined as a marginalized group, which is, kind of ironic considering that, there are very powerful Muslim-ruled states. It's a very Western-centric point of view, by the way. Muslims are seen as marginalized because they're a minority in Western cultures, Western countries. And because of that, it is really kind of politically incorrect to talk about, there are, I will say, by the way, that there are kind of extreme people who use some extreme rhetoric about all of Islam and all Muslims, and I certainly do not subscribe to that. I know that there are Islamic feminists. I don't really believe in painting the entire religion with, one brush, and I think part of the problem is that, Islam, as a young Hirsi Ali has recently said, has not had a reformation the way that other religions have. A lot of religions have, deeply problematic, again, it's a word that has been corrupted by the social justice kind of radicals to such an extent that I kind of don't like using it anymore, but, it is a real world word. Most religions have, very, very flawed, views on social roles, on women, on gays, the Bible has passages that are really not much better than some of what you find in the Quran. But, in the West, we have gotten away from that. We have more liberal forms of religion that have, that don't take up literally. Whereas in many Islamic countries, fundamentalism is still very strong. And you're right, it's not really being discussed. And, there is such a concern about being perceived as Islamophobic that, there are feminists who would rather talk about, men complimenting a woman's appearance on, on the internet in a context that they consider offensive than to talk about ISIS taking thousands of women into sexual slavery. And, it is kind of the epitome of this, political correctness or whatever you want to call it, but it absolutely is political. Now, I do want to say also that the issues that you have brought up are really important. I think, the violence toward children, it is actually the one area in which women commit more violence than men. Now, partly, that is because women spend more time around children, but, even if you adjust for that, I think there's still, there's still evidence that it's a more kind of predominantly female crime. It is something that even when it is recognized, there is usually a tendency to kind of try to explain it away. I remember that there was actually a study, I think, which showed that when parents who kill their children are discussed in the media, it's very, very common to portray the woman as mentally ill and to portray the woman in a kind of more sympathetic way and to portray the men as essentially evil monsters. I think there is definitely a double standard there, and I think there's definitely a need to talk about that more. Yeah, you're right that elder abuse is very much an issue that deserves more attention. I think we definitely need to pay more attention to all of that. Paternity fraud is a very real issue, and I think it's a good issue in that it's an issue where you can, instead of making kind of generalized pronouncements about, victimization, this is a very specific issue where you can ask for specific remedies, and, and I think there are people who have been doing some good work on that, so, I think, all of these are important issues, all of these issues definitely need to be getting more attention.
Just before we have more questions, let's see, we want to be able to contact you again and let you know about future events. Is there anybody who hasn't signed up who wants to? Gone everywhere? Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so anyone else? Yes, please, ma'am.
I'm just wondering if you think by the time we reach true equality between the sexes, whether there will be any of this left in the Western world.
Well,
It seems to me that the more gains that women make, the less women are going to have children, and the more subjugated women are, the more they have to.
I think, actually what you brought up is a very interesting question. regard to, to women's roles, I mean, I do think that one of the problems for liberal culture in general is that even within Western civilization, the groups that tend to have more kids are the ones that are extremely kind of socially conservative. And I do think that in many societies, I think that is a threat, not only to women's rights, but to gay rights, for instance. I think if we have, I mean, obviously some of the people who are born into these groups kind of drift away from their parents' cultural views, but I do think that it may be a dangerous demographic shift. I mean, I think that it's not really, I mean, the relationship is not quite as clear cut. I mean, there are, for instance, Japan, which is not a very feminist society, has an extremely low birth rate. Italy, which is one of the more traditional societies in Europe, has a much lower birth rate than France, which is, much more liberal with regard to gender roles. So, I mean, I think that definitely, this is something that is going to need to be addressed. And I think, by the way, this is another area where I think feminists really do have a blind spot, because a lot of feminists are very, very hostile to anything that they see as sort of pro-natalist rhetoric. And, that's a great way to kind of bring yourself out of existence, really, because, if people with egalitarian values are not having kids, there are going to be fewer people with egalitarian values. And, that is, and I think that's something that we definitely need to talk about. So,
I think Angela Merkel has to get that message.
Well, good. I mean, I'm all in favor of that. So, I sort of feel funny talking about that as someone who doesn't have any kids, I sort of, it's like I'm not really putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak, But, it doesn't really mean that everyone has to have kids. It just means that, I actually, I've often said this as a childless woman. I'm not really, I'm not going to go into my personal circumstances. People's lives sort of happen in ways that, don't necessarily work out the same for everyone. But, I think that, I don't really have any problem as a childless woman, and I've often said that, with social norms that favor, having children. It doesn't mean that you should be a pariah if you don't have kids. It doesn't mean that, people should, treat you as a pitiful creature if you haven't procreated. But at the same time, I think that any society with a healthy self-preservation should have the idea that, ideally the good life should include having kids. I don't have any problem with that. And I think, feminists who have a problem with that are being really somewhat self-destructive and self-defeating. So, yes, Lloyd, please.
So, one of the things I adored your coverage of Mattress Girl at Columbia, and she went so far as to actually bring the mattress to her graduation and bring it on stage. I'm always shocked.
She went further than that. She went so far as to make a pornographic movie reenacting her rape. I don't know if you know it. Well, her rape, in quotation marks.
So the media, though, tends to ignore a lot of these things, and I'm just wondering.
You know what? I mean, I actually do
the
think
media
that
has a lot of men who are there. Why does the media ignore, and like even the Virginia non-rape case?
right.
There are still a lot of people wandering around saying that really did happen, and
Well, they will go around saying, well, we don't know that something didn't happen to her. Well, if you're going to adopt that kind of mentality, I mean, you don't know that, I haven't been abducted by a UFO, it's, yeah. I mean, it's really not, it's not an intellectually honest or mature type of discourse. I mean, if the overwhelming evidence is that, what she said happened didn't happen. I don't really think that, it's up to us to sort of say, well, maybe something did happen to her. Well, right now the probability is that it didn't. And, I mean, is it possible that something did happen to her? Maybe, but, I think the burden of proof really is on those who would want to show that something did happen. And, the evidence is that it didn't. I do think that these two cases actually did make a dent in the, myth of the woman who never lies about rape. I think that, in terms of Emma Selkowitz, a lot of people came to her defense, and...
The National Organization of Women gave her a prize.
Oh, of course, yeah, but that's the National Organization of Women, and I think actually they gave her a prize before some of these disclosures, not that it would have made a difference, but, I think that in the mainstream media, those revelations definitely made a difference in terms of, many people being more willing to entertain the idea that, there was another side to that story. And there was a piece in the New York Times Magazine that, wasn't entirely pro, defendant in that case, but definitely gave both sides and, didn't automatically presume that Emma Selkowitz was telling the truth. I think that there has been something of a shift. It needs to continue. I think we really do need to restore the balance in the discussion of those issues. The University of Virginia case, I think, has made a difference. I think many more people than before, I think, are willing to sort of say that, automatically believing the self-designated victim is not a good idea, because, you need to be skeptical, and, I think we need to sort of seize that momentum, because, I will tell you, I thought in 2007, when the Duke University case, where there were several lacrosse players, when that case fell apart, and it became very clear that it was a hoax, I really thought at that point that we had seen the kind of high point of this kind of moral panic about rape. And that there really, I thought it was going to be a turning point in, people being more willing to show skepticism about these high-profile rape accusations. Well, then Steubenville came around and the atmosphere shifted again, and, we are where we are today. I think that we really do need to keep this discussion going. We need to, to continue to make these arguments. We need to highlight these cases where there are false accusations. We need to also highlight the fact that there are real people who are victimized by those accusations. I mean, one thing that is interesting, Amanda Marcotte, who has been mentioned here, who, initially was kind of railing against people who were questioning Jackie's story. And I think she actually compared them to Holocaust deniers at one point. I really do think that she's, not completely mentally well. But she was really, she was tweeting furiously and saying, there are these people who, don't want to admit that rape ever happens. Like, who's that? Is there anyone who's arguing that rape never happens? Of course not. That is completely ludicrous. She, after she was kind of done having that tantrum, she basically switched to saying, well, yeah, okay, so that was a hoax, but, it's really just evidence that the vast majority of, false claims of rape don't really hurt anyone because, they're just fantasies that don't involve accusations against a specific man. And she has actually claimed, I mean, she sort of shifted from saying that false accusations of rape basically don't exist, to saying, well, there may be false accusations of rape, but like this kind of archetype of a woman accusing a specific man of rape, you know, any kind of gender politics. I mean, that really should be kind of a red flag right there. Because, you know, I mean, if you look at some of these cases that I've written about, Emma Solkowitz was, you know, was involved in feminist activism before any of this happened. In a number of these other cases, you know, the activism really predates the, you know, the alleged rape. But I mean, I really think that we need to, you know, one area where I think we are seeing some promising, you know, effective activism is families of accused men who are advocating on their behalf. And partly that is because you have women doing some of this advocacy, and I think they are being successful. You know, I think we really cannot underestimate, you know, the fact that the vast majority of, you know, men's and women's lives are deeply intertwined. I mean, one reason that feminism was able to succeed as it has is that, you know, the majority of men have, you know, wives, have daughters whose, you know, for instance, equal education they were concerned about. And I mean, it was very easy to make the pitch to men that, you know, women should have equal opportunity because most men have, you know, women they care about. And, you know, conversely, I think if you manage to really get the message across to women that, you know, this could happen to your son, this could happen to your brother, you know, this could happen to your husband, you know, if, you know, a female student or co-worker accuses them of sexual harassment. I mean, for instance, if you look at the story of Tim Hunt, you know, the scientist who was kind of raked over the coals for telling a joke about, you know, women in the lab and, you know, falling in love with women in the lab. His wife, who is also a scientist, has been one of his biggest defenders. Some of his, you know, female colleagues and former students have defended him. I mean, I think that, again, you know, this really cannot be done in isolation. And I think, you know, female support really is essential. So, yes, please.
No, sorry, we've got a order here.
Just one more, how about one more?
Yeah.
Sorry, come join the line if you want to.
Oh, okay. All right.
I thought I'd bring up this point as I see a lot of value in the sociological field, but I understand the reason why some other people don't. I see a lot of value in teaching and educating people about developmental disabilities. I see a lot of value in teaching people about gender-based issues. However, I feel like it's lost a lot of focus, or I feel like it's lost a lot of importance in today's society. And I think you might have heard of this in Japan. There are a lot of people who don't even consider social sciences they're valuable in any way.
I haven't heard of that.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I came across this article, and I suppose it kind of kindled some fire here, so I figured I might as well bring it up. Now, my question is there some kind of reform that social sciences or sociological fields can really bring to the table or adopt some kind of recent or a little more current issues, and instead of getting absolved with gender politics, instead of getting absolved with you know, more statistical sides of things, you know, adopt a real scientific method. And I think this is kind of long-winded as it is, but I think...
No, I understand what you're saying. I mean, I think what, yeah.
I just want to say we're running a little over time because of the fact that we had a very late start. But we're going to try and move really quickly now so that everybody who wants to ask a question gets a chance. It has to be brief.
Oh, excellent.
In your answer. Thank you.
That brief is fine.
So, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, I'm just going to try to answer this quickly. I mean, I think I see what you're saying. I mean, I think social sciences right now really are very, very corrupted by a political bias. And it's unfortunate because I think, you know, it means that we really cannot trust the results of studies, for instance, because we know that most of them are gender. That is often quite explicit. I think the answer is really to try to, to address that bias and to, I think we need more people of different viewpoints doing social science. I think, there has been recently some expression of concern about the political biases in the social sciences and just the way that the field is just so overwhelmingly skewed toward a particular viewpoint. I think that we need to try to change that, and I think, yes, definitely we need more rigorous science. I think we need to, again, try to screen out some of the biases. The Academy, and I want to wrap this up as quickly as I can, but I think the Academy really has been, to a very large extent, kind of taken over by kind of radical left elements. And I think it's going to take a while to change that, and I think we do need to start changing that. And, I don't really know that I have a good solution, but the problem is very pervasive.